My son and daughter-in-law, Ethan and Chloe, took me to a 5-star hotel for the first time. We stayed the entire weekend, but then he said, "Thanks for the stay, Mom," and he fled, leaving me with no money to pay the bill. Suddenly, the elderly receptionist came out from behind the counter and asked, "Are you Mr. Arthur's daughter? I worked for your father for 33 years. Before he died, he told me, 'Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her.'" When I opened the envelope, I was speechless because my son had planned all of this from the beginning, and what I discovered inside changed my life forever. Let me tell you how I got to that nightmare moment. 2 weeks ago, Ethan called me with a voice I hadn't heard since he was a boy. Excited, warm, as if he really cared. "Mom, I want to take you somewhere special. Chloe and I want to thank you for everything you did for us." My hands trembled holding the phone. 66 years of life, working in silence, raising that man with my own broken hands, and I had never, ever heard words like that come out of his mouth. I booked an incredible hotel, 5 stars. "Mom, you're going to have your own suite. Spa, gourmet restaurant, all-inclusive. It's your gift. You deserve it." I closed my eyes and the tears rolled down on their own. I thought that finally, after so many years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights cleaning other people's houses, of wrecked knees scrubbing floors to pay for his college, my son saw me. He valued me. He loved me. What a fool I was. On Friday morning, Ethan and Chloe picked me up in a gleaming black car. She was wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. He was wearing expensive sunglasses and that perfect smile he always used when he wanted something. But I didn't know it then. I just saw my son, successful, elegant, finally proud of his mother. The hotel was a palace. Towering marble columns, floors so bright you could see your reflection, crystal chandeliers that seemed to rain golden light. The smell of jasmine and expensive wood floated in the air. I had never stepped foot in a place like that. I felt small, out of place, with my old brown dress and my worn-out shoes. But Ethan took my arm and whispered, "Relax, Mom. You're as important as anyone here." Chloe smiled beside me, perfect, made up like a magazine model. "Carol, you're going to love the suite. It has a view of the garden, a hot tub, everything." Her voice was sweet as poisoned honey, but I didn't know it. I just felt gratitude, happiness, that warm feeling in my chest, thinking that maybe, just maybe, my life was finally getting better. The suite was bigger than my entire apartment. A huge bed with white sheets that looked like clouds. Giant windows overlooking a garden full of red and yellow flowers. A cream-colored sofa where 3 people could sleep. And the bathroom, my God. The bathroom had pearl-colored tiles, mirrors with golden lights, towels so soft they made you want to cry. I sat on the bed and touched the sheets with trembling hands. This was real. My son had brought me here. He loved me. The weekend was a dream. Breakfasts with exotic fruits I had never tried. Meals in the restaurant where the waiters treated you like a queen. Ethan ordered wine. Chloe laughed her crystal laugh, and I felt like part of something beautiful. For the first time in decades, I didn't think about debts, about bills, about the pain in my back. There was only that moment of false peace. On Saturday night, we had dinner on the hotel terrace. The city lights sparkled in the distance like fallen stars. Ethan raised his glass and said, "To you, Mom, for everything you sacrificed for me." Chloe clapped. I cried. We toasted. And as the sweet wine went down my throat, I didn't know I was swallowing my own destruction. On Sunday morning, Ethan told me to come down to the lobby at 11. "We're going to check out together, Mom. Don't worry." I went down on time, with my small suitcase and my full heart. He and Chloe were already there, talking to the blonde receptionist. I approached, smiling. Ethan saw me, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Thanks for the stay, Mom." It was an unforgettable weekend. Then he put the bill in my hands. $11,000. And he left. They walked away slowly, as if they were strolling through a park. Ethan with his hands in his pockets. Chloe with her designer bag hanging from her shoulder, both of them laughing softly, whispering things in each other's ears. I watched them walk through the glass doors, get into that gleaming black car, and disappear into the morning traffic. Just like that, as if it were nothing, as if I weren't his mother. As if the last 3 days hadn't existed. My legs stopped working. The paper with the bill trembled so much in my hands that the numbers became blurry. $11,000. 11,000. I earned $800 a month cleaning houses. $11,000 was more than a year of my life, working until I broke my back, and my son knew it. He knew exactly how much I earned, how much I had, how much I didn't have. He knew I couldn't pay that. I could never. The blonde receptionist cleared her throat gently from the counter. "Ma'am, will you be paying with cash or a card?" Her voice was kind, professional, but there was something in her eyes. Pity. She was watching my humiliation in real time and trying to be polite about it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out, just a choked gasp, as if someone had kicked me in the stomach. Around me, the lobby was still alive. A young couple laughed by the marble fountain. A man in a suit was talking on his phone in English, gesturing with his free hand. A family with small children dragged suitcases toward the elevator. Everyone living their normal lives, while mine fell to pieces in front of them. I felt heat in my cheeks, pure humiliation running through me like liquid fire. I don't have it." The words came out broken, barely a whisper. The receptionist tilted her head, waiting. Her pink nails tapped softly on the keyboard. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, I can call the manager." Problem. Such a small word to describe the abyss I had just fallen into. My son had abandoned me in a luxury hotel with no way to pay. He had used me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what he was going to do, planning it, enjoying it. Tears began to fall without permission. Thick, hot, loaded with rage and shame. The guests started to look at me, some with curiosity, others quickly looking away, embarrassed to witness something so intimate and painful. The receptionist got nervous. "Ma'am, please, calm down. We'll figure this out." But her voice sounded hollow. There was no solution. I didn't have $11,000. I didn't even have 1,000. I barely had bus fare to get home. Suddenly, I heard slow steps shuffling across the marble. Steps of someone older. I looked up with soaked eyes and saw an elderly woman coming out from behind the counter. She must have been over 80 years old. Completely white hair pulled back in a bun, deep wrinkles that told decades of stories, and honey-colored eyes that looked at me with a strange intensity. She wore the hotel uniform, but hers was different. Older, as if she had been wearing the same fabric for 30 years. She approached me with short but firm steps. The blonde receptionist looked at her, surprised. "Beatrice, you don't have to." But the old woman raised a wrinkled hand, silencing her. Beatrice. That name meant nothing to me then. The old woman stopped in front of me, so close I could smell her soft perfume of lavender and thyme. She studied my face as if she were looking for something specific. Her eyes scanned my features with a mixture of astonishment and sadness. "You are Mr. Arthur's daughter." Her voice was raspy but firm. The question hit me like a fist in the chest. Arthur, my father. It had been more than 30 years since anyone had spoken that name in front of me. He had died when I was 35, leaving me alone with a young child and no inheritance. Only blurred memories of a serious man who worked too much and spoke little. Yes, I'm his daughter. My voice came out broken, confused. How did this woman know who my father was? Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were holding back an enormous emotion. Then she opened them, and a single tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. "I worked for your father for 33 years. From the time I was 20 until the day he died." The lobby seemed to freeze. The sounds became distant. Only she and I existed in that suspended moment. "Your father was a great man. Difficult, demanding, but great. I was a housekeeper in his home. I cleaned, I cooked, I took care of his things." Her voice trembled with each word, heavy with a weight I didn't understand. "Before he died, he called me to his bed. He was very sick. He could barely speak. He took my hand and told me something I never forgot." Beatrice put her hand in her uniform pocket and pulled out a yellowish folded envelope, battered by the years. The corners were worn. The ink on the front was almost faded. But there, in shaky handwriting, was my name, Carol. He told me, "Beatrice, someday my daughter will come here. She'll be alone. She'll be lost. When you see her, give this to her. It's the only thing I can give her now." She held the envelope out to me with trembling hands. I stared at it, not daring to touch it. He knew I would work here. He got me hired at this hotel 30 years ago. He told me to wait, that someday you would come. And here you are. Her voice broke completely. After 33 years, I can finally keep my promise. I took the envelope with numb fingers. It was heavy. Something solid was inside. Something more than paper. I opened it slowly, feeling every second stretch like hot rubber. Inside was a folded letter and an old rusty metal key. The key had a number engraved on it, 447, and hanging from it was a small leather tag with a handwritten address. I unfolded the letter, my father's handwriting. That slanted script I remembered from the few times he signed documents at home. The words hit me like stones. "Carol, if you're reading this, it's because you finally discovered that nothing in our family was what it seemed. Forgive me for the secrets. Forgive me for leaving you without explanations. This key opens a storage unit at the address Beatrice will give you. Inside you will find the truth about who I really was, and about who you are. Go alone. Trust only yourself. Your father, Arthur." I read the letter 3 times in a row, but the words still didn't make sense. Secrets, truth, who I really was. Every phrase was an enigma wrapped in fog. My father had been a quiet, hard-working man who left early and came home late. He never talked about his work. He never shared anything personal. When he died, I expected some small inheritance, something to help me raise Ethan. But there was nothing. Only debts that I had to pay by selling the few pieces of furniture that were left. And now, 30 years later, a rusty key and a letter telling me it had all been a lie. I looked up at Beatrice. She was watching me with those honey-colored eyes, filled with something that seemed mixed with urgency. "What's in that storage unit?" My voice sounded stronger than I expected, cutting through the thick silence around us. Beatrice shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Your father never told me. He just asked me to give this to you when he saw you lost and alone. And here you are." I looked again at the leather tag hanging from the key. The address was written in faded black ink. Industrial Street, 447, Storage Unit 12, East Side. I knew that area. It was an abandoned part of the city, full of old warehouses and broken streets where no one went after dark. A dark, forgotten place, perfect for hiding secrets you didn't want anyone to find. "Ma'am, what about the hotel bill?" The blonde receptionist's voice brought me sharply back to reality. She was still standing there, holding that paper with $11,000 that I couldn't pay. The humiliation hit me again, but now there was something else. Rage. A cold, sharp rage that grew in my chest like cutting ice. My son had done this to me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what was going to happen, planning it. Beatrice turned to the receptionist with an authority I didn't expect from someone so elderly. "I will take care of the lady's bill. Put it in my name. I'll pay it in installments from my salary." The receptionist opened her mouth to protest, but Beatrice silenced her with a look. "Your father saved my life more times than I can count. This is the least I can do for his daughter." I didn't know what to say. The words got stuck in my throat. This woman, this stranger who had kept a secret for 3 decades, was paying my debt. A debt that my own son had created to destroy me. I can't accept this. Beatrice took my hands in hers, wrinkled and cold. "Yes, you can, and you will. But first, you're going to go to that address. You're going to open that storage unit. And you're going to find out why your son did what he did." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" Beatrice squeezed my hands with surprising strength. "Your father told me things before he died. Things about your family. About secrets he kept buried his whole life. And he told me that someday, someone would come looking for that truth. Someone of your blood. But I didn't expect it to be you who needed it. I expected it to be someone else." A shiver ran down my back. Who else knew about this? Beatrice let go of my hands and took a step back, as if saying the next part cost her physical effort. "Your son was here 6 months ago. He asked for me. He said he was researching his grandfather's life for a family project. I told him I had worked for Mr. Arthur. That I knew him well. He asked me a lot of questions. Too many. About properties. About money. About inheritances. The world tilted beneath my feet. Ethan had been here. He had talked to Beatrice. He had researched my father. 6 months ago. 6 months planning this. Planning to bring me here. Humiliate me. Leave me with nothing. But why? What had he discovered that I didn't know? What did you tell him? My voice was barely a trembling whisper. Beatrice looked down. Ashamed. I told him your father had properties. That he had left things unresolved. I didn't give him details. But it was enough. I saw how his eyes lit up. Pure greed. And I knew I had made a mistake. I felt nauseous. My son had come here. He had manipulated this old woman to get information, and then he had designed all of this. The trip to the hotel, the luxuries, the fake smiles, all to leave me in ruins while he searched for what my father had hidden. I need to go to that storage unit. The words came out firm, loaded with a determination I didn't know I had. Beatrice nodded slowly. Go now. Before he gets there first. Because if Ethan finds out where it is, he won't leave you anything. I left the hotel in a daze, the key clutched in my fist until the metal cut into my skin. The midday sun hit my face, blinding me for a moment. The city kept moving, indifferent to my pain. Cars sped by. People walked hurriedly. Street vendors shouted their wares. And I just stood there, holding on to a rusty key and a truth I still didn't understand. I took a bus to the east side. The ride lasted almost an hour. I sat by the window, watching the city change from clean, modern buildings to old constructions with graffiti and broken windows. The streets became narrower, dirtier, more dangerous. When I got to my stop, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and dark violet. Industrial Street 447 was exactly as I remembered it from decades ago. An endless row of rusty metal warehouses with corroded doors and huge padlocks. Some had broken windows, others were completely sealed. Weeds grew between the cracks in the pavement. Trash piled up in the corners. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of barking dogs. I walked slowly, counting the numbers on the doors. Storage Unit 8, Storage Unit 9, Storage Unit 10. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I arrived. Storage Unit 12. A dark gray metal door, taller than me, with a huge padlock that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Thick cobwebs hung from the corners. Dust covered every inch. I took the key from my pocket. My hands were shaking so much it took me 3 tries to get it into the lock. When it finally went in, the metal screeched with a sharp sound that made my skin crawl. I turned the key slowly. The lock opened with a dry click that echoed in the silence. I removed the padlock and let it fall to the ground. Then, with both hands, I pushed the door. It opened slowly, creaking as if it were screaming in pain. A blast of cold, damp air came from inside, bringing with it the smell of humidity, rusty metal, and something else. Something old. Something that had been waiting to be discovered for 30 years. I looked inside. Total darkness. Only shadows dancing in the gloom. I fumbled for my cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and took the first step toward the truth my father had buried. And what I saw inside made me understand that my life would never be the same. My phone's light cut through the darkness in a trembling beam that barely illuminated 6 feet in front of me. The inside of the storage unit smelled like neglect, like years of silence accumulated between cold metal walls. My footsteps echoed against the cracked concrete floor, each echo multiplying into ghostly whispers. I advanced slowly, sweeping the light over every corner, every shadow that seemed to move. The space was larger than I imagined. About 60 feet long, maybe 30 feet wide. The walls were covered in rusty metal shelves, filled with cardboard boxes rotting from the humidity. Some had collapsed, spilling their contents onto the floor-yellowed papers, destroyed folders, blurry photographs. In the center of the storage unit was an old wooden table, covered in dust so thick it looked like gray velvet. And on that table, perfectly centered as if someone had left it there yesterday, was a large, thick manila envelope, untouched, with no dust, as if time hadn't touched it. I approached slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. This didn't make sense. Everything else in the unit was destroyed by decades of neglect, but that envelope looked new. Someone had been here, recently. I reached out a trembling hand and took it. It was heavy, full of more than just paper. I opened it carefully and emptied its contents onto the table. Documents. Dozens of documents. Property deeds, birth certificates, death certificates, old black and white photographs, and a brown leather notebook with folded corners. I held the phone's flashlight between my teeth to free my hands and started to look through them. The first deed was for a house downtown. Address: Liberty Avenue 328. Registered in the name of Arthur Ruiz, my father. Date: 1982. I had never seen that address. I never knew my father owned properties beyond the humble house where I grew up. I checked the next document, another property, and another, and another. 5 houses in total, all in expensive parts of the city, all registered during the 70s and 80s. How was this possible? My father worked in a textile factory. He earned enough to support us. But there were never any luxuries, never any vacations, no new cars, no expensive clothes. My mother sewed our skirts from scraps. I wore shoes until the soles fell off. And my father owned 5 properties? My hands trembled holding those papers that were rewriting my entire family history. I picked up one of the birth certificates. The name stopped my heart. Robert Ruiz Delgado. Date of birth: April 15th, 1968. Father's name: Arthur Ruiz. Mother's name: Victoria Delgado. I read the document 3 times, but the words didn't change. My father had another son, a son born 6 years before me, a son with another woman, a brother I never knew existed. I searched frantically through the papers. I found another certificate. Susan Ruiz Torres, born in 1975. Father: Arthur Ruiz. Mother: Martina Torres. Another daughter, 3 years younger than me. My breathing became irregular, choppy. My father had another family, maybe 2, maybe more. While I grew up believing we were his only world, he had other children, other women, other parallel lives that never crossed with mine. The photographs confirmed everything. I picked one up and held it closer to the phone's light. My father, young, maybe 30, with his arm around a dark-haired woman with a wide smile. She was holding a baby. Behind them, a large house with a garden. In the next photo, my father with another woman, blonde this time, in front of a gleaming car. In another, him alone, standing in front of an office building, wearing a suit and tie. He wasn't a factory worker. He was someone else entirely. I opened the leather notebook with trembling hands. The pages were filled with my father's slanted handwriting. They were records, meticulous notes of income and expenses. January 1978. Rent collection: $3,200. Payment to Victoria: $500. Payment to Elena, my mother: $400. Savings for new property: $2,300. Page after page, year after year, a cold, calculated record of how he divided his money between his different families. I sank to the concrete floor, clutching the notebook against my chest. Everything I believed about my father was a lie. He wasn't a humble man who worked hard to support us. He was a businessman who had accumulated properties by renting out houses, exploiting tenants, and keeping multiple families in ignorance. And my mother never knew. She never suspected that the money he gave her was just a fraction of what he really had. But that didn't explain why Ethan had done what he did. How had he discovered all this? And why was abandoning me at that hotel part of his plan? I searched through the documents until I found a recent one. A letter dated 7 months ago, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Dear Ethan Hernandez, in response to your inquiry regarding the estate of Arthur Ruiz, I can confirm that the properties mentioned are still registered in the deceased's name. However, there is a sealed will deposited with this notary's office that cannot be opened until all legitimate heirs are located and notified. The heirs recognized to date are Robert Ruiz Delgado and Susan Ruiz Torres. Sincerely, Public Notary number 47. There it was. Ethan had researched his grandfather, had discovered the existence of the properties, the will, the other heirs, and he had decided that this fortune was his. But to claim it, he needed me, the other legitimate daughter, to disappear or be so destroyed that I couldn't fight for it legally. That's why the hotel. That's why the humiliation. That's why leaving me with no money. He wanted to break me emotionally, ruin me financially, so that when the time came to open that will, I would have no strength or resources to claim anything. A metallic sound pulled me from my thoughts. It came from outside. Footsteps. Someone was walking near the storage unit. I jumped to my feet, stuffed the most important documents into my purse, and turned off my phone's flashlight. The darkness swallowed me whole. The footsteps got closer, slow, heavy, intentional. They stopped right in front of the storage unit door. I knew you'd come here, Mom. Ethan's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Icy, with no trace of the fake affection he had used during the weekend. I turned on my phone and pointed the light at the door. He was there, a silhouette cut against the orange sunset sky. He was no longer wearing the expensive sunglasses or the perfect smile. His face was hard, his eyes shining with something dark I had never seen in him before. Beatrice told you, didn't she? The old fool couldn't keep her mouth shut. He took a step inside. I instinctively stepped back. I spent 6 months investigating your father. 6 months discovering that the saintly grandfather I never knew was actually a liar who built a fortune while keeping us in poverty. And now that fortune belongs to me. He had other children. Ethan. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. There's a will. Other heirs. It's not just yours. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. Those heirs don't know you exist. And if you don't exist legally, you can't claim anything. That's why I needed to destroy you first. Leave you with no money, no resources, no dignity, so that when the time comes to open that will, you'll be so broken you can't fight. Chloe appeared behind him, her arms crossed, and that cold expression that I now understood was her true face. The hotel was my idea, she said with venomous pride. An emotional and financial blow at the same time. Elegant, don't you think? They laughed together, and that sound turned my stomach. My son and his wife had planned this as if it were a game, as if I weren't human, as if my pain were entertainment. I'm not going to let you keep this. The words came out before I could think. Ethan took another step toward me, and this time his expression turned threatening. You don't have a choice, Mom. You're already ruined. You're already left with nothing, and when I'm done with you, you won't even have a place to live. But then, from the darkness at the back of the storage unit, a deep male voice cut through the air like thunder. She's not alone. We all froze. The voice had come from the shadows at the back of the storage unit, deep and firm, loaded with authority. I turned the phone's light in that direction, and the figure of a man slowly emerged from the darkness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his 60s. He had gray hair cut very short, deep wrinkles around his eyes, and a square jaw that looked strangely familiar. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a dark green shirt, but there was something in his posture that commanded respect. He stopped about 10 feet from us, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes scanned Ethan with contempt before landing on me with an expression I couldn't decipher. There was pain there, and also recognition. Who the hell are you? Ethan took a step forward, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice sounded less confident. The man didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, studying me as if he were seeing a ghost. I'm Robert, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Robert Ruiz, your brother. The world stopped. The words floated in the thick air of the storage unit like dense smoke. Brother. The birth certificate I had seen minutes ago was coming to life right before my eyes. The son my father had 6 years before me with another woman. The heir Ethan had mentioned. He was here. He had been waiting in the shadows all this time. It can't be, I whispered, although deep down I knew it was true. Robert stepped into the light, and I could see him better. He had the same eyes as my father, dark brown, with that penetrating gaze I remembered from when I was a child. The same shape of the nose, the same jawline, It was like seeing my father alive again. But 30 years later, tears began to blur my vision without permission. Robert took a folded paper from his shirt pocket and held it out to me. 3 months ago, I received a summons from the notary's office. They told me my father had died 30 years ago and had left a will, that I was one of the heirs. I didn't know anything about this. My mother never spoke to me about Arthur Ruiz. I never knew my father. I grew up believing he had abandoned me before I was born. I took the paper with trembling hands. It was the same letter I had seen in the documents. The one from the notary. I started digging, Robert continued, his voice heavy with restrained emotion. I found out I had sisters. You, Carol, and another, Susan, who died 10 years ago in an accident. I discovered that our father was a man who lived parallel lives, that he lied to all of us, that he built a fortune behind our mothers' backs while they worked themselves to the bone to support us. His voice broke on the last word. I could see the raw pain in his eyes, the same pain I felt. We were children of the same deceit, victims of the same man who had given us life but denied us the truth. When I discovered this storage unit existed, I came to investigate. I found all the documents, the properties, the accounts, the letters. And I discovered something else. He turned to Ethan with a look that could freeze hell. I discovered that your son had been snooping around, that he had bribed employees at the notary's office to get private information, that he had contacted Beatrice to get details about the properties, and I understood he was planning something. So I decided to wait, to watch, to see how far he was willing to go. Robert walked slowly toward Ethan, who instinctively stepped back. Chloe pressed herself against the wall, her previous arrogance vanishing. What I didn't expect was that you would be so cruel, that you would humiliate your own mother in public, that you would leave her without money, without dignity, just to break her emotionally. Robert stopped in front of Ethan, much taller, much more imposing. You're worse than our father. He at least had the decency to keep his lies secret. You used them as weapons against the woman who gave you life. Ethan tried to regain his defiant posture, but his voice came out shaky. That fortune is mine. I'm his grandson. I have more right than you, a bastard who never even knew the old man. Robert didn't move, but the tension in his jaw became visible. Legally, we are equal heirs. Carol, me, and you, through your mother. But here's the difference. I didn't come to steal. I came to know the truth, and to make sure no one else suffered from Arthur Ruiz's secrets. He turned to me, and his expression softened. Carol, I know this is a lot. I know your world just collapsed, but you need to know something else. He took another document from his inner shirt pocket. This one was older, yellowish, with official seals. Our father's will was very specific. He divided the properties into equal parts among his legitimate children. But he added a clause. If any of the heirs tries to dispossess another through deceit or violence, they automatically lose their share. The words fell like bombs in the silence of the storage unit. I looked at Ethan and saw his face turn pale. Robert continued. Relentless. Your son planned to destroy you to get your share. He paid private investigators. He bribed employees. He conspired to leave you in financial and emotional ruin. It's all documented. I made sure to gather every piece of evidence over the last 3 months. He took out his cell phone and started swiping through photos. Emails between Ethan and a private investigator. Bank transfers to corrupt notary employees. Text messages between him and Chloe, planning every detail of the weekend at the hotel. It was all there. Every step of their cruel plan captured in digital evidence that would destroy them legally. According to the will's clause, Ethan loses all right to the inheritance. And you, Chloe, he looked at my daughter-in-law with absolute coldness. As an accomplice, you won't see a cent either. Chloe let out a choked cry. This is a setup. You can't prove it. Robert smiled without humor. I can, and I will. I've already submitted copies of all this evidence to the notary in charge of the will. The legal hearing is in 2 weeks. By then, you two won't just lose the inheritance. You'll be facing charges for fraud, emotional distress, and conspiracy. Ethan exploded. You're a damn meddler. This isn't your problem. She's my mother, not yours. He took a threatening step toward Robert, but he didn't flinch. Exactly. She's your mother. The woman who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who gave you everything she had, and you paid her back with betrayal. That makes you worse than a thief. It makes you a monster. The silence that followed was so thick you could feel it physically. Ethan was trembling with helpless rage. Chloe was crying against the wall, her mask of perfection completely shattered. And I was just standing there, trying to process that in a single afternoon I had lost my son but gained a brother. That my father was a liar, but had the foresight to protect us from the grave. That everything I thought I knew about my family was false. Robert came over to me and put a large, rough hand on my shoulder. I know it hurts. Believe me, I know. I went through the same thing 3 months ago. Finding out your entire life was built on lies is like dying and being reborn at the same time. But there's something you need to understand. His voice became softer, almost tender. Our father was a terrible man, but we don't have to be. We can choose what to do with what he left us. I don't want that fortune. The words came out of my mouth before I could think. Robert nodded slowly, as if he had expected exactly that response. Me neither. At least, not all of it. That's why I have a proposal. But first, we need to finish this. He turned to Ethan one last time. You have 2 options. You walk out of here now. You stay away from your mother forever. And maybe, just maybe, I won't press criminal charges. Or you try to fight this legally, and I'll make sure you spend the next few years in a cell. Ethan looked at me with pure hatred. There was no trace of the son I once loved. There was only a cruel stranger who had used my love as a weapon. This isn't over. He spat the words like venom. He grabbed Chloe by the arm, and they both left the storage unit, their footsteps echoing against the metal until they faded into the distance. And then, for the first time all afternoon, Robert and I were left alone. The silence that remained after Ethan and Chloe left was different. It wasn't oppressive or threatening. It was strange, filled with unanswered questions and half-discovered truths. Robert stood in front of me, hands in his pockets, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and caution, as if I were a wounded animal that might attack or flee at any moment. And maybe he was right. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I should cry, scream, or just collapse onto the floor and give up. How did you know I'd be here today? My voice sounded hoarse, worn out by so many emotions in so few hours. Robert shrugged and leaned against one of the rusty shelves. I didn't know for sure, but I knew your son's plan. I knew he would bring you to the hotel, that he'd abandon you, and I assumed Beatrice would keep her promise. So I've come here every evening for the past 2 weeks, waiting. Today was the day. 2 weeks. This man, this stranger who shared my blood, had spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned storage unit to protect me from a danger I didn't even know existed. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. We don't know each other. Robert looked away into the shadows at the back of the unit, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Because I spent 58 years believing I was alone in the world, he said finally, his voice thick with an old, deep sadness. My mother died when I was 19. I never had siblings. I never had any family besides her. And when I found out I had sisters, that there were people in the world who shared my blood, I felt something I had never felt before. Hope. The possibility of not being alone. He turned back to me, and his eyes were shining with unshed tears. Susan is already gone. It was just you and me left. And I wasn't going to let your son rob you before we even had a chance to meet. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. Thick, hot, unstoppable. I cried for my lost son, for my lying father, for my mother who died without knowing the truth. For all the years Robert and I had lived apart, ignorant of each other's existence. I cried until there were no tears left, just dry sobs that racked my whole body. And Robert came over and hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to comfort me with empty words. He just held me while I fell apart, his embrace firm and warm, smelling like simple soap and honesty. And in that hug from a stranger who was my brother, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Safety. The feeling that someone was on my side unconditionally, with no hidden agendas, no betrayals waiting in the shadows. When I finally calmed down, Robert let me go and pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. I took it and wiped my face, embarrassed to have broken down like that. "Sorry," I mumbled. He shook his head. "Don't apologize. You have every right to cry. You have the right to feel everything you're feeling." I cried for weeks when I found out the truth about our father. He bent down and picked up the leather notebook that I had dropped on the floor. He opened it to a marked page and showed it to me. "Look at this. Here's the proof of who Arthur Ruiz really was." I held the phone light closer. It was a journal entry dated 1985. "Victoria threatened me today, said she'd tell everyone if I don't give her more money. Gave her an extra $500 to keep her quiet. Elena suspects something. I must be more careful. The properties are generating good income. Soon I'll be able to buy the 5th house." I read entry after entry, each one colder and more calculating than the last. My father didn't write about love or regret. He wrote about money, control, manipulation, how to keep his women separate, how to make sure none of his children ever met, how to maximize his profits from the properties while giving us the bare minimum to survive. It was a meticulous record of a double, triple life, maintained with the precision of an accountant and the coldness of a con man. "He was a monster," I said, the words burning my throat. Robert closed the notebook slowly. "He was human, a selfish, cowardly, and cruel human. But human nonetheless." He sat down on the concrete floor, leaning his back against the wall, and motioned for me to sit next to him. I did, too tired to keep standing. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" Robert continued. "That in the end, with all his money and his properties and his secrets, he died alone in a hospital. None of his women were there. None of his children were with him. Only Beatrice, the employee he paid to keep his lies. Beatrice took care of him until the end. I remembered the old woman's words in the hotel lobby." Robert nodded. "She was the only loyal person he had, and it wasn't even out of love. It was out of misplaced loyalty and the 33 years of salary he gave her. But at least he had the decency to fulfill his last wish, to deliver that envelope, to make sure you knew the truth." We sat in silence for several minutes. The storage unit was cold, the dampness seeping through the cracks in the metal, but there was something comforting about sharing this desolate space with someone who understood exactly what I was feeling. "You said you had a proposal." I finally broke the silence. Robert sat up straight and looked me directly in the eyes. "The 5 properties our father left are worth approximately $800,000 in total. According to the will, we each get $400,000. It's money neither of us needed, but now we have it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My proposal is this. We sell the properties. We take that money, and we use it to do something our father never did. Something good." "Like what?" Robert smiled for the first time since I'd met him, and that smile completely transformed his face. "Beatrice needs money for her retirement. She's worked her whole life and barely has enough to survive. We'll give her $50,000. It's the least we can do for the woman who kept our father's secrets, but ultimately helped us find each other." I nodded slowly. That made sense. It was fair. The rest, we split, but not to spend on ourselves. We use it to help other people. We can create a fund for single mothers who work cleaning houses, like our mothers. Women who are raising children alone, breaking their backs to give them an education. We give them scholarships. We give them opportunities. We do something meaningful with this dirty money. His eyes were shining with intensity. We turn the legacy of a liar into hope for people who actually need it. The tears came back, but this time they were different. They weren't from pain, but from something like peace. "Our father used that money to control and hurt," I said slowly. "We'll use it to free and heal." Robert held out his hand to me. "Are you in?" I took his hand, rough and strong, and shook it firmly. "I'm in." We got up from the floor, brushing off the dust and dampness. Robert began collecting the documents scattered on the table, organizing them into neat piles. "We'll need a lawyer. Someone to help us with the legal process for the will and the sale of the properties." I nodded. "I know someone. A neighbor who's a lawyer. She was always good to me." Robert smiled. "Perfect. We start the paperwork tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word sounded strange. A few hours ago, I had no tomorrow. I was destroyed, abandoned, with no future. And now I had a brother, a plan, and something like a purpose. "Robert," I said as we walked toward the exit of the storage unit. "Thank you for waiting for me, for protecting me, for everything." He stopped at the door and looked at me with those eyes that were like my father's but completely different in their warmth. "Don't thank me. We're family. And real family doesn't abandon you in a hotel lobby with a bill you can't pay. Real family waits in abandoned storage units for 2 weeks just to make sure you're okay." His voice cracked a little. "I spent my whole life without siblings. Now that I've found you, I'm not leaving you alone ever again." We walked out of the storage unit together. The sky was completely dark now, dotted with stars that glittered like promises. Robert closed the metal door and put the padlock back on. "This place has served its purpose," he said. "We don't need to come back here." We walked down the deserted industrial street, our steps falling into sync without planning to. Robert walked me to the bus stop. The street was deserted, lit only by old-fashioned streetlights that flickered with a yellowish glow. The cold of the night was beginning to seep through my clothes, and I hugged myself, trying to stay warm. He took off his denim jacket without a word and put it over my shoulders. It smelled like cheap detergent and honesty, so different from the expensive perfumes and lies of Ethan. "Where do you live?" Robert asked, his hands now in his pants pockets. I gave him my address. It was an old building on the north side, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I had paid for it with 30 years of hard work. "That's far. I'll take you." I shook my head. "I don't want to bother you anymore." He let out a short laugh. "Carol, I just spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned storage unit. Driving you home is no bother at all." His truck was parked 2 blocks away. It was old, a dirty white, with dents in the doors and a cracked windshield in one corner. But it started on the first try, purring with an engine that sounded well cared for. I got into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt while Robert turned on the heat. The inside smelled like old coffee and the cheap air fresheners that hang from the rear-view mirror. He drove in silence for the first few minutes, concentrating on the city's night traffic. I stared out the window, watching the industrial streets gradually transform into residential areas, families eating dinner behind lit windows, kids playing on the sidewalks under their parents' supervision. Normal, simple, honest lives. Everything I thought I had, and that turned out to be a carefully constructed illusion. "What do you do for work?" Robert's question pulled me from my thoughts. "I clean houses. 5 days a week. Sometimes 6, if I need extra money." My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. Robert nodded slowly. "My mother cleaned houses too. She worked until the cancer left her so weak she couldn't hold a broom anymore. She died with her hands wrecked and her back broken. She was 48. The pain in his voice was so raw, it made my chest ache. "My mother died at 52, diabetes. She didn't have money for medicine. She kept working until she collapsed at one of her clients' houses. The owner didn't even call an ambulance. She just called me to come get her because she was messing up her marble floor." The words came out bitter, loaded with a rage I had held onto for 14 years. Robert hit the steering wheel with the palm of his hand, not hard, but with helpless frustration. "Our mothers killed themselves working while our father was collecting properties. He could have helped them. He could have given us better lives. But he chose secrecy and control over everything." He rubbed his eyes with one hand, as if trying to erase painful images. "That's why I want to use this money, to help other women. So no more mothers have to die cleaning the floors of people who don't even see them as human." "What do you do?" I asked, needing to shift the weight of the conversation. Robert smiled sadly. "I'm a mechanic. I have a small shop on the south side. I fix old cars, the ones rich people don't want anymore. I don't make much, but it's honest. Every cent that comes into my pocket, I earned with my own hands, not by stealing from anyone or lying to anyone." There was pride in his voice, a genuine pride my son never had. Ethan. The thought of him cut through me like a knife. My son, the boy I raised, who I fed with food I didn't eat so he wouldn't go hungry. The boy I walked to school every day for 12 years, through sun and rain because we didn't have money for the bus. The boy who cried in my arms when he had his first heartbreak, when he failed a test, when he felt rejected by the world. That boy had turned into a cruel stranger who used me as a disposable tool. Do you think he'll be back? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Robert didn't answer right away. He kept driving, his hands firm on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the road. Honestly, I don't know. Greed does strange things to people. He might accept that he lost and disappear. Or he might try something desperate. He glanced at me. That's why I want you to have this. He pulled something from the compartment between the seats and handed it to me. It was a card with his phone number handwritten on it. If Ethan tries to contact you, if he threatens you, if you feel like you're in danger, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is. I don't care what day. You call me, and I'll be there. The seriousness in his voice left no room for doubt. This man, who had known me for just a few hours, was willing to protect me, while my son, who had shared my life for 38 years, had planned my destruction. I put the card in my purse next to the documents from the storage unit. Robert, there's something I don't understand. He looked at me briefly before turning back to the road. Why did our father write that will that way, with that clause about heirs trying to cheat each other? If he spent his whole life lying and manipulating, why put a moral rule in his will? Robert exhaled slowly. I've thought a lot about that. I think, at the end, when he knew he was dying, he had a moment of clarity, or maybe cowardice. He didn't have the courage to tell us the truth in life, but he wanted to make sure that, after his death, none of his children would destroy each other over his dirty money. It was his twisted way of protecting us. Not from ourselves, but from each other. One last manipulation, I said bitterly. Even from the grave, he's still controlling things. Robert nodded. But this time, his manipulation protected us. Without that clause, your son would have won. He would have destroyed you legally and taken everything. Our father, for the first time in his selfish life, did something that benefited us, even if it was by accident. We arrived at my building 20 minutes later. It was a 5-story gray concrete block with small balconies full of clotheslines and pots with half-dead plants. It wasn't pretty, but it was home. Robert turned off the engine and turned to me. Will you be okay tonight? The question was loaded with genuine concern. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I'll be okay. I have a lot to think about, but I'll be okay. I got out of the truck and handed him back his jacket. He took it, but didn't move. Carol, tomorrow at 10 in the morning, I have an appointment with my lawyer. Can you come? I want you to be there when we start the proceedings for the will. I hesitated for a moment. I had work tomorrow. 3 houses to clean. But this was more important. This was the future. I'll be there. Give me the address. Robert took out his phone and sent me the location in a text. Then he got out of the truck and walked around the vehicle to where I was standing. He gave me a quick but firm hug. You're going to get through this. All of it. The pain, the betrayal, the confusion. You'll get through it because you're stronger than you think. He pulled back and looked me in the eyes. And you're not alone. Not anymore. You've got me now. I walked up the stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. Every step was an effort after the longest day of my life. I unlocked the door and entered my small 2-room space. Everything was exactly as I had left it on Friday morning, before Ethan picked me up to take me to the hotel. The unwashed coffee mug in the sink, the newspaper open on the table, my unmade bed, as if time had frozen. But I wasn't the same person who had left that apartment 3 days ago. That Carol was naive. She still believed in her son. She still lived in the illusion of a loving family. This Carol knew the truth. About her father, about her son, about the fragility of blood ties when money and greed get in the way. But she also knew something new. That family doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of a brother you never knew, waiting in an abandoned storage unit to make sure you're okay. I sank onto the sofa without even taking off my shoes. The exhaustion was total, physical, and emotional. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, there was only the silence of my apartment and the slow beat of my heart. Tomorrow, the legal process would begin. Tomorrow, I would face the consequences of everything I had discovered. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. My cell phone vibrated in my purse. I took it out, expecting a message from Robert. But it wasn't him. It was Ethan. The message glowed on my phone's screen like an open wound. Mom, we need to talk. Please, give me a chance to explain. It's not what you think. I love you. Your son, Ethan. I read the words 1, 2, 3 times. Each reading turned my stomach with more force. I love you. Those 2 words that had meant everything to me for 38 years now sounded hollow, empty, like fake coins trying to pass for gold. My fingers trembled over the keypad. Part of me wanted to reply. The part that was still a mother, that remembered the little boy who used to hug my legs when he was afraid of the dark. But another part, the part that had painfully matured in the last few hours, knew that replying would be opening a door that had to stay closed. Ethan didn't want to explain. He wanted to manipulate. It was the only thing he knew how to do now. I blocked his number. The act was simple, just 3 taps on the screen, but it felt like cutting an umbilical cord that had been connected for almost 4 decades. I cried as I did it. Silent tears that rolled down my cheeks and fell onto the phone screen, distorting the letters. I was mourning the death of something that probably never really existed. The son I loved was an illusion. The real man was a cruel stranger. I got up from the sofa and walked to the window. From the 3rd floor, I could see the street, half lit by streetlights that needed repairing. A stray dog was digging through the trash. A young couple walked by holding hands. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. I wondered how many people in those gray buildings were living their own silent tragedies. How many mothers had been betrayed by their children. How many family secrets were hidden behind those lit windows. The phone vibrated again. This time it was an unknown number. My heart sped up. I hesitated before opening the message. Carol, it's Chloe. Please, listen to me. Ethan is desperate. We made a mistake. We can fix this. You would forgive us, right? You're his mother. Mothers always forgive. The fury I felt was so intense I had to sit down so I wouldn't fall. Chloe, the woman who had planned my humiliation as if it were a fun game, was now asking for my forgiveness. Not out of remorse, but because they had lost. I blocked that number too. Then I turned off the phone completely and left it on the table. I needed silence. I needed to think. I walked to my bedroom and fell onto the bed without getting undressed. The sheets smelled like cheap fabric softener and loneliness. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but my mind was a whirlwind of images and memories, mixing with the recent reality. I saw Ethan at 5 years old, crying because the kids at school made fun of his second-hand clothes. I hugged him then and promised him that one day he would have new things. I saw Ethan at 15, proud when he won his first science fair award. I had worked a double shift that week to pay for his project materials. I saw Ethan at 25, introducing me to Chloe, telling me she was the love of his life. I had cried with happiness because I thought my son had found companionship. All those memories were now tainted. Every hug, every smile, every I love you, Mom now had a shadow of doubt. When did he start to change? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as an obstacle? Was it when he discovered my father's properties, or was there always something dark in him that I refused to see? The questions tortured me without offering answers. Finally, around 3 in the morning, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. I dreamed of my father. We were in a house I didn't recognize, huge and empty. He was walking ahead of me, always out of reach, no matter how fast I ran. Every room I opened was filled with photographs of people I didn't know, entire families smiling at the camera. And in every photograph, my father was there, his arm around different women, different children. All his secret lives hanging on the walls like trophies. I woke up with a start at 6 in the morning, my heart racing and the sheets soaked in sweat. The gray light of dawn was filtering through the window. I got up, my body aching as if I had fought a physical battle during the night. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to wake up, to return to reality. The woman staring back at me from the mirror looked 10 years older. Deep dark circles, chapped lips, more pronounced wrinkles. Pain aged you. I made coffee as the sun finished rising. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the hot mug, letting the steam warm my face. Today, I had to go with Robert to the lawyer. Today, the process of untangling my father's inheritance would officially begin. Today, I had to be strong. But in this moment, in the stillness of my kitchen, I allowed myself to be fragile. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. At 8, I turned on my phone. There were 15 messages from Ethan from different numbers. I didn't open them. I deleted them all, unread. There were 5 missed calls from Chloe. I ignored them too. And there was one message from Robert, sent at 7 in the morning. Good morning, Carol. I hope you got some rest. I'll see you at 10. We're going to start fixing this together. Your brother, Robert. Your brother. Those 2 words filled me with a strange warmth. I'd never had siblings. I was always an only child. But now I had Robert, a man who protected me when he could have ignored me, who offered me an alliance when he could have seen me as competition, who called me sister after knowing me for barely a day. Family doesn't always come from the expected place. Sometimes it comes from the shadows of an abandoned storage unit. I showered, got dressed in my most presentable clothes, a dark gray dress I saved for special occasions, and combed my hair carefully. I needed to look dignified. I needed to feel in control, even if I was a chaotic mess inside. At 9:30, I took the bus downtown to the lawyer's office. The ride was long, the morning traffic dense and loud, but I used that time to prepare myself mentally. Robert was already waiting outside the building when I arrived. He was wearing black slacks and a white shirt, freshly ironed. He looked nervous but determined. He smiled when he saw me approach. I thought you might change your mind. I shook my head. No, I need to do this. For me, for my mother, for all the truths that were never spoken. He nodded and offered me his arm. I took it, and together we entered the building. The office was on the 5th floor. Beige walls, framed diplomas, bookshelves full of legal codes. The lawyer was a man in his 50s, with thick glasses and a serious expression. His name was Javier. He greeted us with a formal handshake and invited us to sit in leather chairs in front of his dark wooden desk. Mr. Robert explained the basic situation to me on the phone, Javier began, opening a thick folder. But I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Every detail is important. For the next hour, Robert and I told him everything. Our father's secret families, the will with the special clause, Ethan's plan to destroy me and take the inheritance, the evidence Robert had gathered, the documents from the storage unit, everything. Javier took meticulous notes, asking specific questions, asking for clarification. His face remained neutral, professional, but I could see his eyebrows raise occasionally at the most shocking details. This is complex, but manageable, Javier said finally, closing his notebook. The clause in the will is clear. If we can prove that Ethan tried to dispossess Carol through deceit, he automatically loses any right to the inheritance. The evidence Robert gathered is solid. Emails, text messages, bank transfers. It will be enough. He looked at me directly. But I need to ask you something, Mrs. Carroll. Are you prepared for this? Proceeding legally means your son will face consequences, possibly criminal charges. Are you ready for that? The question hit me like a fist. Was I ready to see my son face criminal charges? The mother in me screamed no, that we should find another way, that I should forgive him. But the woman who had been humiliated, betrayed, and used knew there was no other choice. I'm ready, I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. My son made his decisions. Now he must face the consequences. Javier nodded in approval. Javier began to explain the legal process. First, he would present the evidence to the notary in charge of the will. Then, a formal hearing would be convened where all heirs would be summoned. Ethan would have a chance to defend himself, but with the amount of proof Robert had gathered, his options were limited. The entire process will take between 4 and 6 weeks, Javier said, organizing the documents on his desk. But I can tell you now, the outcome is almost certain. Ethan will lose his rights. The inheritance will be divided between you two. Robert and I exchanged a look. We want to do something specific with that money, I said. We don't want to keep it all. We want to create a fund to help single mothers who work cleaning houses. Give them scholarships for their children. financial support, opportunities. Javier took off his glasses and looked at us with an expression he hadn't shown before. Respect, even admiration. That is extraordinary. I can help you establish a legal foundation, ensure the money is used correctly, that it reaches those who truly need it. We spent another hour discussing the details. What would the foundation be called? How would we select the beneficiaries? What percentage of the money would go to educational scholarships and what percentage to direct financial support? Robert suggested calling it the Elena and Victoria Foundation, in honor of our mothers. I nodded, tears in my eyes. It was perfect. Our mothers, who died broken and forgotten, would now have a legacy that would help other women avoid suffering the same fate. When we left the office, it was almost 2 in the afternoon. The sun was shining brightly, and the city was bustling with life. Robert invited me to get something to eat. We found a small family restaurant 2 blocks away, with plastic tables and a menu handwritten on a chalkboard. We ordered soup and sodas. We ate in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. "Do you think our mothers would be proud?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. Robert put down his spoon and looked at me directly. "I think they'd be more than proud. They'd be amazed. Their children, who grew up apart, who never knew about each other, found one another and decided to turn pain into hope. That's more than our father ever did in his entire life." He was right. Our father spent decades accumulating properties and secrets, building walls between his families. We, in less than 24 hours, had decided to tear down those walls and use his resources to build something better. "Are you scared of the hearing?" Robert asked. I thought about the question honestly. Yes. I'll have to see Ethan face to face. Listen to his justifications, his lies. Watch him try to manipulate everyone like he always has. But I also know I have to do it. Not for revenge, but for justice. To close this chapter so I can move on. Robert nodded slowly. "I'll be there, right by your side, through the whole hearing. You're not facing him alone." We finished eating and walked through the downtown area with no particular destination. We passed shops, parks, street vendors. People bustled around us, each person living their own complex story. "Do you know what's the strangest part of all this?" I said, as we sat on a bench under the shade of a huge tree. "If Ethan hadn't been so greedy, if he hadn't betrayed me in such a cruel way, I never would have known the truth. I never would have gone to that storage unit. I never would have met you." Robert let out a bitter laugh. "It's ironic. His betrayal brought us together. His plan to destroy you ended up creating something he never expected. A real family. We sat there for almost an hour, just talking, sharing memories of our separate but strangely similar childhoods. Our mother's struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of hunger and cold, the small triumphs we celebrated as if they were huge. We discovered we had more in common than just blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, meetings with Javier, and preparing for the hearing. Ethan tried to contact me countless times, messages from new numbers, letters left at my door. He even showed up in front of my building once, but I didn't give in. Robert had given me an emergency whistle and the number of a police officer friend. Every time Ethan got close, we documented it. More evidence of harassment for the legal case. Chloe tried a different tactic. She posted a fake story on social media about how I was a cruel mother who was destroying her son over money. Some acquaintances wrote to me, asking if it was true. I explained the real situation. Some believed me. Others chose Ethan's side. I learned that in times of crisis, you discover who your real friends are. And the list was shorter than I expected. But I also discovered new allies. Beatrice, the receptionist from the hotel, visited me one afternoon. She brought homemade cookies and tea. We sat in my small living room, and she cried as she apologized for giving information to Ethan months ago. "I didn't know he would use it to hurt you," she sobbed. "I just thought he was interested in his grandfather." I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. She had been as much a victim of my father's secrets as any of us. The night before the hearing, I could barely sleep. I got up 3 times for water. I checked my dark gray dress 5 times to make sure it was clean and ironed. I mentally rehearsed what I would say if I was asked to speak. At 4 in the morning, I finally gave up and made coffee. I sat by the window, watching the city slowly wake up, the sky turning from black to gray to orange. Robert arrived at 8 to pick me up. He was wearing a dark suit that looked new, probably bought specifically for this occasion. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The hearing was in the notary's building, an old but elegant structure in the historic district. We entered a large room with dark wood walls, cushioned chairs, and a long desk where the notary and lawyers would sit. Ethan was already there. He looked gaunt, with deep dark circles and a wrinkled suit. Chloe was beside him, perfectly made up, but with a tense expression. When they saw me, Ethan stood up. "Mom, please." He started, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Robert squeezed my shoulder gently, and we sat on the opposite side of the room. The division was clear. Them on one side, us on the other. The notary entered, an older man with completely white hair and a severe expression. He sat, reviewed his documents, and began the hearing. For the next 2 hours, Javier presented all the evidence. The emails where Ethan planned my humiliation, the bank transfers to private investigators, the text messages between him and Chloe, laughing at my naivety, Beatrice's testimony. It was all there, exposed under the cold light of the legal room. Ethan's lawyer tried to argue it was all a misunderstanding, that his client was just researching family history, that the hotel incident was a miscommunication. But his argument sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence. The notary listened in silence, taking occasional notes, his expression unreadable. When it was time for the involved parties to speak, Ethan stood up. "I just wanted what was mine," he said, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and desperation. "My grandfather was rich, and we lived in poverty. Why? Why did he hoard all that while my mother cleaned houses until she was destroyed? I had a right to that fortune. I needed it. I deserved it." He looked directly at me. "And you, Mom, you never would have done anything with that money. You would have wasted it on charity or just sat on it. I was going to do something great with it." I stood up, surprising myself. "You're right about one thing, Ethan. Your grandfather was rich, and he kept us in poverty. That was cruel and unfair. But your solution was to repeat his cruelty, to lie, to manipulate, to use people. You became him." My voice broke, but I continued. "I would have given you anything if you had just asked. Anything. But you chose to destroy me instead of trusting me. And that choice says more about who you are than it ever will about who your grandfather was." The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan sank into his chair, his head in his hands. Chloe was crying silently. The notary closed his folder with a sharp sound. "I have heard enough. The evidence is clear. Ethan Hernandez violated the clause in the will prohibiting deceit among heirs. He therefore forfeits all rights to the estate of Arthur Ruiz. The entirety of the estate will be divided between the remaining legitimate heirs, Carol Ruiz and Robert Ruiz." He struck his wooden gavel against the desk. "This hearing is closed." We walked out of the notary's office into a bright sunlight that seemed inappropriately cheerful. Robert hugged me tight on the sidewalk. "You did it. You faced him, and you won." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, shod. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost my son. "We're going to turn that pain into something beautiful," Robert said, as if he could read my mind. "We're going to help so many families that your son will never be able to erase the good we do." 6 months later, the Elena and Victoria Foundation officially opened. We had sold the 5 properties for a total of $820,000. We gave $50,000 to Beatrice, who cried for an hour when we gave her the check. The rest we divided, a portion for us to secure our futures, and the largest part for the foundation. In the first year, we gave out 30 full scholarships to the children of domestic workers. We helped 50 mothers with emergency rent payments. We funded 3 small businesses for women who wanted to stop cleaning other people's houses. I never spoke to Ethan again. I heard through the grapevine that he and Chloe divorced 6 months after the hearing, that he moved to another city, that he works a job that doesn't pay well. Part of me still aches when I think of him. He's my son. That love doesn't get erased completely, but I learned that loving someone doesn't mean you let them destroy you. Sometimes, the hardest love is the one you practice from a distance. Robert became my true family. We have dinner together every Sunday. We celebrate birthdays. We cry on the anniversaries of our mother's deaths. And we work together at the foundation, interviewing families, handing out scholarships, watching as our father's dirty money finally does some good in the world. One day, while we were reviewing applications in my small apartment, Robert told me something I'll never forget. Our father taught us how not to live. He showed us the wrong path so clearly that we had no choice but to pick the opposite one. In that twisted way, he gave us a gift. He gave us the certainty of what kind of people we didn't want to be. He was right. I didn't want to be like my father, hoarding secrets and building empires on lies. I didn't want to be like my son, destroying others for greed. I wanted to be like my mother, like Robert's mother, women who worked until they broke to give their children something better. Today, 3 years after that afternoon in the hotel where my world collapsed, I look back and see the path clearly. The pain was real. The betrayal was devastating. But from those ashes, something unexpected grew. A brotherhood with a man who should have been a stranger, but became my anchor. A foundation that carries the names of 2 forgotten women and now helps hundreds. And a version of myself that is stronger, wiser, and finally free from the lies that defined my family for generations. My son left me penniless in a luxury hotel, but an elderly receptionist gave me an envelope that changed my life. Inside wasn't just a key to a storage unit, it was the key to the truth. And even though that truth shattered me, it also set me free. Now I walk through the world without the weight of secrets that weren't mine, without the illusion of a perfect family that never existed, just with the imperfect but honest reality of who I am and what I choose to do with the time I have left. And that, I discovered, is worth more than any inheritance.